Hello there, welcome. I have started this new pattern called the Larksfoot stitch, and I'm loving it so much. I said, you know what, I'm going to get on here and do a quick tutorial to you viewers, my friends, my family, and all of your family now, Facebook family, about how to do this Larkfoot stitch. It is the perfect stitch for a heavy yarn, but I'm sure you can do it with anything. So you have those burlap blanket yarns that you want to use, and they are not sometimes you have that big yarn and you're like, what to do with it? Well, here you go. I'm using a size 4 worsted weight yarn from my project, but let me just show you what's going on here. Here you go, guys. It's just my joy. I saw it and I stopped the other project I was working on so I could come and jump on here. And this calls for 3 different colors. So whenever you want to make a 3 different color blanket or scarf, here you go. I'm suggesting this for a blanket. This is going to be more like a lap blanket, but I'll show you how to do it. Let's get into it. I'm going to show you real quickly. So what I'm going to use today is just some leftover yarn, and I'm going to do a small sample for you. Okay, so 3 different colors. Small sample yarn here. Okay, so let's start with the white. So these are worsted weight samples, and I'm using a size I hook, 5.5 millimeters, and let's do this. So the lark's foot is worked over multiples of 4 plus 5. So chain 4, multiples of chain 4, and then you add 5. So let's do this. I've made my starting stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And let's make it just a little bit bigger. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think this should be big enough for me to show you the rows, okay? And then after doing that, you add 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then now the next row, 1 DC in 4th chain from hook. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 4th chain from hook gets a DC, and if you remember DC, you yaw 1 time, pick up, pull through 2, pick up, pull through 2. And that DC counts, this plus that initial chain counts as 2 DC. And then I'm going to do 1 more DC in the next chain. So what it works up to is having 3 DCs together here, right? Then I'm going to chain 1. I'm going to skip next chain, which is next one, and I'm going to put a DC in each of the next 3 chains. So 1, next one gets a DC, 2, and the next one gets a DC, 3. So if you keep that in mind, the idea is to have little groups of 3 DCs all the way across. So chain 1, skip a stitch, and then a set of 3 DCs. So 1, and you know how these leftover yarns, when they get to the end, start to bundle up on you. 2, 3. Chain 1, skip 1, a set of 3 DCs. Do this all the way to the end of the row. So I've come to the last group of 3 DCs, and the last one goes into that what was the first chain. Then what are we going to do? We're going to turn our work, and then to start round 2, we start with chain 3. And this chain 3 does count as a DC. And then in the next 2 DCs in this group of 3, we're going to put 1 DC each. what we're going to do in this second round is literally mirror the first round. So we're going to chain one again, skip that space and put a DC in each of these DC. Chain one, DC, 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 chain one, DC, DC, DC. We're just going to do exactly what we did. We're just going to mirror this strip for round 2. Go ahead, meet you at the end. And we have come to the last stitch, and don't forget, well, you shouldn't forget in this pattern, because since you know we need groups of 3s, this first chain over here is a last of the 3 stitches. So what do we have so far? Here we go. So what just looks like little boxes and spaces, right? So chain 3 blocks and the chain 1 spaces. Doesn't look like our beautiful pattern yet, right? Anyway, we're going to change here, and how I do the change in color is and if you watch any of my other videos, you'll know this, I finish out the current stitch with the new yarn. So I'm working a DC here, so where I have these 2 loops left and I would have picked up 1 to finish, I'm going to get my new yarn. And let's see if we can do the green. Okay, and I'm going to get this, and I'm going to use the green to pick up and complete this stitch. And then now we're ready to work with the green. And in this pattern, each color is worked over 2 rounds. So 2 rows of white, then it's going to be 2 rows of green, then it's going to be 2 rows of the color that we're using. So whatever 3 colors you use, it's 2 rows each of those colors. And you'll figure it out. You'll see how easy this is. So for round 3 now, we're going to chain 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this 4 counts as 1 DC and a chain 1, right? And we are going to then skip this where it counts as 1. We're going to skip the next DC and we're going to make a DC in the last of that third of the 3 DC. So now you don't quite see the block yet, but it's there. And what we're going to do now, we're going to work what is called a long DC. And a long DC just is a DC, but it means that the first part is a little loose. So you see how you have 2 loops here? We're going down to the top of, normally we'd put the DC on this stitch, but we're going to go 2 rows down and go under this stitch and pick up. And then that's the one we're going to pull up a little long. Then pick up, pull through 2, pull through 2. And then DC in the next stitch, which is the first DC of the next batch of 3 DCs. And this is what we have, guys. Then we chain 1, skip next DC, 1 DC in the next DC, which is the last of the 3. Then we're going to do another long DC. So we go down 2 rows below, pick up that stitch, and we're going to pull it up loose and pick up, pull through 2, pick up, pull through 2, and it's the same number of counts like a DC, it's just a little loose. And then the 1 DC in this. Want to do it again because this is the repeat now. Chain 1, skip the next stitch, 1 regular DC in the top of that DC, which is the last of the 3, the group of 3. Then we're going to DC, but we're going down 2 rows below to go under. Pull this up loose, pick up, pull through, and then DC in the next. So this is all groups of 3 DCs. See that? It's starting to form. Do that to the end of the row. And we are at the end of our row. We chain 1, and what was the first chain 3 to start that row before counts as a DC, so we are going to work this last DC in the top of that DC. And then we turn. And then this becomes, we start this row by chaining 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. which is chain 3 for the first DC and chain 1 for the space. Then we're going to just put a DC on top of the next DC. And we're going to put regular DCs in the top of all these 3 DCs. We are just going to mirror this row now. And this is just a row of plain DCs and chain. So chain 1 to skip that space, and then DC in each of the next 3 DCs. We're at a space, so we chain 1 for the space because we're doing the exact same thing. And we go. Do that to the end of the row. And guys, we are at the end of the row again, so we have done a DC in each of these 3 DCs, but here we are, and this is supposed to be a space and a DC. So we chain 1, skip 1 chain, and in the second chain, or what is the third chain counting up from the bottom, you put a DC. But remember, because we're going to change colors now because we have done our 2 rows, we will complete this DC with our new color. All right, so I grab my new color and I'm going to complete this DC, and then just pull on the old color a little to tighten it. All right, we can cut off some of this yarn here. I didn't have my scissors before, so let's cut the white that we started with. Let's cut the green because we're done with that as well. And you can just make little knots, 1 knot, until you're ready to sew in those edges. And here we're starting with this. We're just gonna knot that. What we do now, we're gonna turn and we are going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And this time we have 2 spaces here, so we need to make that first lark's foot. We're going to go with a long DC down in the bottom there, 2 rows down, and then DC in the top of the next DC. Then we chain 1, DC in the top of, skip 1 DC, DC in the top of the last of that batch of 3. Then long DC, 2 rows down. Now remember where that space is. Pick up your stitch, pull up, yarn through, DC. Okay, chain 1, skip 1 stitch, DC in the top of the 3rd DC, last DC of the chain of the 3 DC groups. Now we're going to make our long DC down. Sorry guys, it's changing color because this was a cupcakes yarn I had, and I'd finished this corner to corner blanket, and this is what I had left. But I just wanted to use it up to show you the swatch of the lark's foot. And guys, that's that. You just figure it out. So every time here we are, so we're chaining 1, skip 1, DC. It's in batches of 3s, long DC here, all the way down to 2 rows below, then a regular DC, and you have a batch of 3 DCs. Then chain 1, skip 1 DC, DC in the next DC, and where we are at the end, we have 2 spaces, so we know we need a long DC. Long DC all the way down, 2 rows down, pull it up, make 1, and remember this was a chain 4, so we're going to make a DC in the top of chain 3 here to finish this row. Okay guys, look at that, beautiful. And then when you have done that first row with your color, you know when you turn, it's just going to be a mirror. You're just doing regular DCs for the next row. So there's always a row of regular DCs after you have made the row with the long DCs. So chain 1, 2, 3, which counts as the first DC. So the DC goes into the next one, DC in the next stitch, and you have a group of 3 DCs. Then chain 1, skip that space because we're just mirroring at this moment, and 3 DCs. And guys, there you have it. This is one of the patterns that once you have set up these 2 first rows with the little blocks and spaces, then the next ones pick up the Larksfoot stitch, which is this long DC over the 2 spaces you made, and they're all in rows, batches of 3s, and it's 2 rows per color. Go ahead, guys, link it up, do the Larkfoot stitch and enjoy yourself. Make blankets. Show me your pictures. Okay, thank you. And if you have not yet subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It means a lot. Hit the like button and hit the bell, the notification bell. And let me see. Food and Crochet by Daisy. What else is there in life? Okay, thank you.